I'm sure everyone has heard of the recent incidents surrounding Henry Nowak, Karmelo Anthony, and the decapitation incident in Belfast. On the far right, we were getting used to such incidents, but this, especially the case of Henry Nowak, was one too much. So much so that there are real riots in the United Kingdom. And you know it is messed up when white people finally stand up for themselves. So in this video I'm going to recap what happened, and more importantly I'm going to tell you what we should do. I'll start chronologically with the Austin Metcalf Karmelo Anthony situation. For those of you who don't know about the situation, I'll read you a recap from Grok, which I edited a little bit. On April 2nd, 2025, during a rain-delayed high school track meet in Frisco, Texas, white 17-year-old Austin Metcalf from Memorial High School was fatally stabbed in the chest by black 17-year-old Karmelo Anthony from Centennial High School. Anthony had entered the Memorial's team's tent to get out of the rain. He was told to leave by Austin's twin brother and then confronted by Austin. After an argument which was started by Anthony, witnesses said Anthony reached into his backpack and warned, "Touch me and see what happens." Austin touched his shoulder and told Karmelo that he didn't want to fight him. And then Austin shoved Anthony, and Karmelo reacted by pulling out a knife and stabbing Austin once before fleeing the tent. Austin died from the wound. The two teens did not know each other, and Anthony had no prior criminal record. Anthony was charged as an adult with first-degree murder and claimed self-defense. On June 9, 2026, a jury convicted him of murder, rejecting the self-defense claim, as the shove was deemed insufficient to justify deadly force. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison the next day, and he is eligible for parole after 17.5 years. Now, we could go into the details and start interpreting this case, but that's not the focus of this video. What I want to show you is the reactions of black people to this case. Mind you, not all black people, since a lot of black people were actually reasonable about this case. But you usually hear the loudest voices, which are most often the stupidest voices. So, when the trial started last year, Anthony's family set up a fundraiser and they raised over $600,000. Do you know how crazy this is? Black people will literally collect $500,000 for a murderer. Just like they did with George Floyd, where they raised millions of dollars for a career criminal who died of a fentanyl overdose. But at least this time the money went to the family rather than some grifter who bought a mansion with that money. But funny enough, this time the money was also very likely misused. Karmelo Anthony now claims that he has no money left, which is interesting because his family moved to a new house and it looks like one of his family members, either his sister or mother, has gotten a nose job. But I vaguely remember this from a post, so someone please fact check this if you remember the same post with pictures as evidence. But that is not the worst thing. If you're one of the few people who even use Threads and you opened the app in the last few days, like me, you've probably noticed the enormous amount of black people commenting the situation. So let's go through some of these threads. One person writes, "I am a black mom, I have a black son. This breaks my heart. We live in a society that believes black boys and black men should just take the abuse, taunting and punishment given by others. I'm so sorry, Karmelo." And she posts a picture of Karmelo Anthony crying, but this picture is AI generated. The next thread says, "We will continue to write for you, King. Hashtag Karmelo Anthony trial, hashtag free Karmelo." And then she posts an AI generated image of Karmelo Anthony as a king. Another person writes, "Austin Metcalf would still be alive if he minded his business." Another person, this time a white person as we can see from the profile picture, but this could also be a black person, so I don't know, could be some weird lighting. But anyways, the Karmelo Anthony trial is yet more evidence that this country is irredeemably racist. Then another person writes, "My god, this got me all messed up. I cried looking at this picture. He's just a baby who had a whole life ahead of him." Not even correct grammar. And then she posts the same AI generated picture. Now this person is completely insane. "Only God can judge our brother. History will remember Karmelo as a hero. Free Karmelo Anthony." And then he posts another AI generated picture with Karmelo wearing the crown of thorns. What? That is insane. Then the person underneath that thread writes, 35 years for using a legal knife to defend himself. I'm pissed, y'all. And, this whole situation is so crazy, and this commenter just summarizes it perfectly. I was today years old when I learned tens of thousands of black parents are totally cool with their kid stabbing a kid in the heart in response to being shoved. Threats is swiftly identifying the real systemic issue and has nothing to do with white people. And to be honest, this whole situation deserves its own video. But one thing I would like to show you before we move on is that what these black people did to Austin Metcalf even after his death. They doxed his grave and they are posting pictures of them urinating on it. Now, most of them are AI since a lot of black people are actually too lazy to go there, but a couple of them are real, which is just unbelievable. And even those people that photoshopped themselves on it with AI are as bad as the people who actually did it. I'm really at a loss of words here because there are so many emotions and thoughts going through my head just looking at this, and I just can't express them all into something. So let's move on to the next case. But remember that these people, they hate us. Moving on to our second and most tragic story, Henry Nowak. Henry Nowak was an 18-year-old white man walking the streets of Southampton on the 3rd of December 2025 at night when he crossed paths with Vikram Digwa, a Sikh Indian. Sikhs have this tradition that they are wearing ceremonial knives around their neck. And surprisingly, the strict government of the United Kingdom, which has banned all knives, is allowing them to wear these huge knives. Now, we don't know the exact confrontation between the two, but it ended with this Indian stabbing Henry Nowak 5 times. After that, Digwa's brother called the police, and when they arrived, Vikram Digwa falsely accused Henry Nowak of a racially motivated attack. He even faked having a swollen eye. The British police, being the British police, believed the immigrant and they arrested the dying Henry Nowak, who is using his last energy to say that he has been stabbed and that he can't breathe. To which the officer says, "I don't think you have, mate." After a minute or so, Henry probably died on the spot, because a police officer checked his pupils and found no reaction. They then brought him to the hospital where his death was confirmed. Meanwhile, Vikram Digwa was nicely escorted to the police station, where they even gave him the option to choose his meal. But fortunately enough, he has been convicted of murder and sentenced to only 21 years in prison. Another thing which I forgot to mention is that this Indian was filming dying Henry and laughing at him. 21 years for that. No new information probably for the majority of you. But do you know where the UK government messed up? You're probably aware that they are sending British people to jail over anti-immigration remarks on social media. Last year it was like 10,000 arrests. Which means that the jails are full with these people. Meaning that jail justice has been served and will be served. But besides that, you need to understand the system is against you if you're white. Because this is not the only case. Just recently, British police arrested a teenage boy, I think he was 13 or 15, on the street, and then they shoved him towards a metal spiked fence where his jaw was impaled. I'm obviously not going to show you the footage, but instead of calling emergency services right away, they took a walk with him, probably to the police station or the police car, I assume. Please fact check the details in the comments. You can find the video on the Instagram of Ian Byington. He posted about it a week ago or so, but it may have been deleted. So not only do you have these minorities hating you as shown in the case of Karmelo Anthony, but also the system, your own government, and to some extent your own people are working against you. They don't help you and they put you in jail for speaking out. As Nick Fuentes said, this is an allegory of our situation. White people are being stabbed by non-white people and the system puts us in handcuffs while we bleed out. This case already caused some unrest in Southampton where dozens of people showed up to the house of the Digwa family, which was of course protected by the police. And this later led to a clash with the police and the protesters. But this was not the case that sparked the most outrage. Just a few days after the body cam footage of this incident was published, which even led to this whole outrage, a Sudanese immigrant almost beheaded an Irishman in Belfast. It is worth mentioning that this immigrant was part of the Islamic Brotherhood-backed Sudanese armed forces. Fortunately, this was stopped by the neighbors and the man is still alive. But this case led to the biggest outrage in the United Kingdom. It sparked massive race riots in Belfast, leading to a lot of property destruction. On one hand, it is finally nice to see native white people standing up for themselves, but on the other hand, I don't really know how productive this is. Because remember, the minorities and the system hate you. If black people burn down cities, the system accepts it, but if we riot, it will most likely lead to even more bans and restrictions. And this is the dilemma that we face. Are we just going to sit back and try to change the system ourselves, which will take a long time, and will lead to the deaths of hundreds or even thousands of more white people? This is the long-term and safe solution. Or are we going to wait until this crescendos into a situation where a large enough number of people will stand up and fight for themselves? It is an effective short-term solution, but it is also way riskier, and if it fails, we will have lost once and for all, and it will all be over. Now obviously, I am a Christian and I disavow meaningless violence and rioting. It is in the interest of everyone that we try to fix the system ourselves. The far right is growing in Europe and the remigration activists made the Save Europe Act a thing, so go sign it if you live in the EU. But I'm skeptical about the efficiency of this, because when this petition gets 1 million signatures, the only thing that the European Commission has to do is they just have to address it. But they can just say no and laugh in our face, and then all this energy was wasted for nothing. And we can't also really vote our way out of this. I'm not saying that it is impossible, but the elections can be rigged, and a lot of times these far-right candidates like Nigel Farage and Giorgia Meloni will still not do remigration and will still bring a lot of legal immigrants into the country. So, which of these options will it be? Will we be able to change the system from within, or will this crescendo to a point where we just can't take it anymore and where we have to act? Because being Christian doesn't mean that we have to just sit around and watch our civilization die. The Crusades were Christian, the Reconquista was Christian, the Winged Hussars which kicked out the Ottomans from Vienna and saved Christianity in Europe were Christian. At some point we will have to defend ourselves against the forces that are trying to destroy us. We should always strive to do this peacefully, but at some point it is not possible and we will have to be ready for this situation. So this is my message to white men. Don't use the anger that you have for something stupid like a riot. Use your anger as fuel to become better at everything. Log in physically, go to the gym or start a martial art. We need people who are strong and capable. But also log in with academics. If you're in school, try to be the best so that later you can get into a position of power. Or try to start a business and become as rich as you can be. If you're older or not so smart, you can still be an important asset for your community. Someone needs to produce our food, someone needs to build our infrastructure, and someone needs to raise our kids. Every position is important and every person on our side is valuable and irreplaceable. Just work hard, be patient and hide your power level, so that when the time comes we are bigger than they expect and most importantly that we can take care of ourselves. I will do future videos on this, but a channel which already talks about this is Jimmy Talks, so check him out on YouTube and Rumble. If I ever make a video on what to learn and how to form a community, I will most likely use him as my main source. But that's it for now. I'm Slovak Royper and I'll see you next week.